I'm sorry about
Hi,
that. Skype just dropped the call, so I don't know what happened there, but we're still on the air. So, Russ, why don't we just get into, we'll start the show from here. Why don't we start discussing your background, what happened to you as far as toxicities go, and what you do now to aid others with this movement. I know that you are the head of Global Skywatch, and you have quite a bit to share with the audience. So why don't I just let you roll? I'd like to start with experience, what happened to you that guided you roughly a decade ago into the area that you now work in.
Absolutely. First, I want to say thank you for having me on your show. I'm honored to be here. My problem started with mercury toxicity. Back in my early teen years, I started having depression, started having fatigue, depression. I had a lot of shyness, became kind of terribly withdrawn socially, and I didn't know what it was at the time. At the time as a kid, you don't know what's going on. You just feel like everybody's like that until you learn better. But eventually I learned it was amalgam illness or toxicity from the mercury vapor coming off of amalgam fillings. So about the time you start getting fillings, that's when all this started happening to me. So basically in 1995 I became very, very ill. Things started happening between 95 and 2000. I started gaining weight, which was not something that I did. I mean, I played racquetball, I rode my bike, I went out boating. I was very athletic, and suddenly started getting fatigued, started having severe heart problems. So in that 5-year period, everything collapsed. Started having candida issues, horrible sleep problems, on top of my already the emotional issues that I had about shyness and fears and phobias and stuff that I had from childhood. Well, in 2000, I was talking to a friend. Long story short, it's a long story, but a long story short, I was talking to a friend, and she had fibromyalgia, was bedridden, and I was telling her about what was going on with me, and she said, "You have mercury toxicity from your fillings." I'm like, "What? I've never heard of this. What's going on?" Well, she had fibromyalgia, was diagnosed. 5 years, went to one doctor to another, one pharmaceutical after another, and finally she got on the internet, did some research, started having her fillings out. She couldn't afford to have them all out, but she had a few taken out, got out of bed, went back to work, and started changing her life. After 5 years of medical help.
And this is just removing fillings.
Yeah, and she didn't remove all of them. She just removed a few of them, and she started feeling better. So that was a revelation. You ever have something happen to you where you feel like you just got hit by a 2x4? Like, that's the answer I was waiting for. I've been looking for 5 years after all my life had gone. I thought I had cancer. I thought I was going to die, working 4 hours a day. I did nap every afternoon. This is not like me. I'm a guy who works 14 hours a day.
Now, I have a question. Did you that would be a big symptom, actually a big roadblock at that point. And I can totally relate to that. I'm a pretty, like you, worker bee. And so if I started to get lethargic like that, not be able to function, I mean, that's pretty noticeable. Did you go to Western doctors for that? Did you get checked out? Did you try to get some other opinion other than how you were feeling?
No, I didn't. I didn't look any medical help. That's the time, back in 1995, when I started having these issues, I started getting involved in, started doing my own research on herbs and supplements and how I could use natural supplements and herbs and foods and minerals and vitamins to help me. And just did I'm a researcher also by nature. I love to find the puzzle, solve the puzzle. What is the problem? How do we fix this problem? So I did not go to any Western, any doctors or anything. I was doing this on my own.
That's great. And what caused you to go in that direction instead? Was it the friend in your life that had the situation with fibromyalgia sort of led you to this, or was that during the process when you were looking into your own fatigue, etc. And I know it's very frightening when you just said like you thought you were going to die. That's how a lot of my the emails that I'm getting, people are getting really afraid because fatigue and then of course depression that sets in along with it is very debilitating, and it is a fearful thing. So what caused you to? What a gift that you turned towards this herbal remedy versus, going into a Western doctor.
You know, I had been interested in it a few years earlier, and I don't even know. A few years before my health started to rapidly deteriorate between 1995 and 2000, I just started hearing things about it, and I was just drawn to it. I just felt like this is cool, and I did some research and found that there was research and science behind it because I'm a science lover. I love science. And I started finding out that not only was there a lot of science behind it, but I was intrigued by the fact that the government was covering it up, that the FDA was suppressing information about these things, which usually at that point I was educated about what goes on behind the scenes at the government with a lot like the FDA, to discover that if the FDA doesn't like it, it's probably good. It's important and something we should pay attention to. So,
right.
So I had a little background already.
Exactly. The herbs and those types of medicinals seem to have qualities to them that actually work, and the diagnosis associated, let's say if you go into a naturopath, is more holistic. In other words, going after the problem instead of the symptom. And that is something that has been going on for 25 years plus. It seems that, and you're correct, the FDA, it's like they don't want us to get to a point of where we heal because once we heal from the inside out, we live longer, et cetera, et cetera. So there's always been a component of that has been glaring, if you will. And good for you that you sort of got into that and discovered that, and now, of course, you can speak on the subject till the cows come home, and I appreciate that. What is with your Global Skywatch? You've got a Global Skywatch. What's that all about, and what caused you to start that particular situation?
Well, that's a great segue into the third of the last half of the story. Is basically after I had my amalgams out, everything I ever had went away. My memory, my short-term memory, I couldn't remember names, dates, and places. That memory, within about 6-8 months after my amalgams were removed, my memory came back, and it was like a computer. I could remember the names of Hollywood actors, the dates that movies played, whatever, if it was trivia or if it was important, it was incredible. But anyway, everything went away after amalgam removal, and I had 5 years of absolute bliss, and this is what got me into Global Skywatch, the next thing that happened to me. 5 years of no sleep issues, 5 years of feeling powerful, no fears, no fear of confrontation, no shyness. The 17 physical symptoms I had all just vanished and went away. It was absolutely incredible, and I finally realized, I said, this is the way people are supposed to feel. This is the way life is supposed to be. Well, in 2003, I moved to Jamestown, New York, had a view of the whole city out my office window, and 2 years after moving there, 2005, I suddenly saw chemtrails. I didn't know what they were, but I had always been interested in jets and planes. I had taken flying lessons when I was younger. My whole family flew. I had skydivers in my family, Army Ranger. So I had a lot of exposure to that. And I started seeing these jets would come and spray, leave these trails and cause it to be overcast. They'd come for 3 hours at the same time every day, and I could see them out my window. They'd go back and forth, and then they would leave. And when they did this, my sinuses burned. I could taste the metallic taste in the air. My joints hurt. I got fatigued, tired. All these symptoms came on. So, of course, I had a very immediate reaction to it. I reacted very, very quickly and very, very severely to it.
And now, did you make an immediate association with the spraying?
Yeah, pretty much, because they would start spraying, and this is in 2005. This is when the government allocated $996 million for aircraft I'm trying to remember exactly how they worded it, transport services or something. Suddenly, almost $1 billion. The next year it was over $1 billion a year, but 2005 is a kind of a key year where widespread spraying seemed to begin. I've spoken to a lot of people about this, and of course it happened long before that in many areas, but 2005 was pivotal, and that's when I started seeing the widespread spraying. So yeah, I made an immediate association because I could see them spraying. I can smell the stuff in the air, or it burns my sinuses, and I can taste it. I have one thing that probably makes me different than most people, and I learned this a while back, is that I have a really sensitive sense of smell and taste. Why that is, I don't know, but I do. And I can taste the chemtrails.
What you were saying about tasting the chemtrails, that's interesting because I have received emails, and this started back about a year and a half ago, where certain people I really, really trust that bring me incredible reports, unfortunately. One in particular is a gentleman who lives in McCook, Nebraska, and he was talking about it, when he walks outside, the air tastes like a tin can, like a Coca-Cola can or something. And I said, really, what else? And he also was very fatigued, and going down fast and being sprayed incredibly. I mean, day and night he started sending these photos, and you're talking about just a complete overcast on a daily basis of thick white cloud formations, artificial cloud formations. And you're right about the investment in this. We discussed this a few times as far as how much money is going into something like this. So there's a lot of evidence out there that shows us that there's billions. And in 2005, you saw nearly $1 billion allocated. Now there's billions of dollars going into this. So you made the correlation. And what did you find? Perhaps did you find what was in the chemtrail itself that was causing you to have these symptoms and inflammation and lethargia and all the rest of it again? Where did you said you're scientific, so what road did you go down from there?
Well, I immediately started searching on the internet in 2005 when I saw this activity and started having the burning sinuses and the fatigue symptoms and the pain and the taste in the air whenever this happened. I immediately knew something was going on because I know that jets don't emit trails. I've watched the sky since I was a kid. When I was a kid, I was into rockets and jets. It's all I drew. I always watched the sky. I thought they were the coolest things ever made. So I know that something was different when I saw trails coming out of jets. I said, there's something wrong here. So, doing my searching the internet, within a few minutes I came across chemtrails. And one of the sites, of course, that I found was Carnicom's site. And he's got a lot of really good information. I just started diving into this information, and it made sense to me because he was talking about metals, and I was tasting a metallic taste. He was talking about barium salts, and the taste that I described even before I knew what it was a salty metallic taste. Now, I don't know if barium salt tastes like salt, but the original chemtrails that I tasted were salty metallic. And now I would disclaim that by saying there's several different kinds of chemtrails, or at least formulas, and they taste completely different from one another. So it's not just one set of things that are being sprayed, at least not in my experience. They're clearly different tastes, smells, and different subsets of symptoms that go along with it. So I found out pretty quickly with the help of Carnicom's website and other websites where people were sharing their experiences and observations.
So that was a lead-in for you to realize and what was happening to you, your body, and then, of course, now you became interested in the geoengineering programs, no doubt. And just to add to what you've just said regarding the government investing money, I received some data compiled by Joanne Nova. I don't know if you know who this is, at the Science and Policy Institute. And she indicates that the U.S. government spent more than $32.5 billion on climate studies between 1989 and 2009. and that this didn't even account for the $79 billion more spent for climate change technology research, foreign aid, and tax breaks for green energy. So what's going on here?
Why are they? Yeah, so I guess the question is, why are they doing this, right?
That seems to be the question of the year, I'm telling you. Why are they doing it? And, we even now have reports that climate engineering and climate technology and artificial cloud formation, et cetera, we've got information now that these are two separate programs going on, that the climate control versus another type of aerosol spraying that has been linked to aerospace programs and the upper ionosphere and a whole different genre, if you will, of spraying toxic metals.
Absolutely. And I think, I had a background. I was in a relatively small political party for 2 years. And at the time, it was called the U.S. Taxpayers Party, and I worked in there for 2 years and kind of gave up after. They were a great organization, and I really liked what they were doing, but it was impossible to get people in the public involved. But I had this background, and I learned my whole worldview changed in that 2 years because I was exposed to so much information about how government regulators like the FDA are really controlled by the pharmaceutical companies, and this is a phenomenon called controlled regulation, when the industry being regulated takes over the regulation agency. And I learned so much during that 2-year period. So I had this background in understanding how politics really works. I think much more than your typical American does, because I was right in the information center of this political party when I was doing work for them. And so when I started searching for why this is going on, it's not too difficult to start connecting the dots and start discovering that certain very powerful families in the world who control pharmaceuticals, who control oil, are eugenicists. They're interested in population reduction. And as you continue and you look at patents, you can see that HAARP, which there are many HAARP-type devices around the world. There's a network of them. One of the most famous ones in the United States, of course, is in Alaska. And HAARP can do things, according to their own literature, like manipulate weather and create earthquakes. This is not me saying this. This is from their own patents and their own literature. In fact, some of this was on their website that you can go on the Wayback Machine and look at archives of their own website where they talk about this. Of course, that's been since removed since HAARP has become so popular. But ionizing the atmosphere, reducing population, the aluminization of soils to take advantage of Monsanto's aluminum-resistant seeds. We're talking about a big, big operation that has really big implications in agriculture, in health, in the pharmaceutical industry. If you can make people sick, you profit from sickness, then you're practicing a business model called Machiavellianism, which is where you create a problem and then you profit from the solution. And I just hope that people wake up and realize that this is the way that the world works and has been working for some time, and it's time that we learn. It's time that the people learn and understand the way the world works, because this is very harmful to people when they understand what's going on.
Well, like what you said, it's a global system in place, and when you've got weather modification, and you've got the GMO, which is a real big one. I mean, that is just genetically modified seeds that within the seed are the poisons. It's not like it's a hybrid that just suddenly doesn't get infected by pesticides and weather and acidic soils, if you will, or pH imbalanced soils. It's got the pesticide right inside of the seed. That's what the organism is. And I don't think that the general population really knows about that. And, you know, we don't know the side effects other than if you're ingesting poisonous food grown from a poisonous seed. I mean, if an insect's not going to eat it, why are we?
Right, right. And, you know, the amazing thing that has happened in genetics, and I don't necessarily mean that in a good way, is that science has discovered that these incredible machines we have that are either human bodies or plants, which are incredible. I view them as a technology. They're very, very sophisticated, very complex, and they run on a computer program. And if you put DNA, a certain type of DNA, in the plants, or you inject them into the human body, these machines will start to build those proteins that are described in the DNA. And so now that we have plants that produce pesticides, we're literally having a fruit or vegetable that looks nice and safe and colorful and wonderful, but it's got poison in it. And there have been studies, I've looked at the science behind this, and there have been studies, and the studies have been suppressed. People have been fired when they try to expose the studies of liver damage, kidney damage, other organ damage, endocrine system disruption. Very bad stuff.
Some are even suggesting that it's altering the human DNA.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you have, let's even take cancer, for example, is that there's been some great articles in the last few years about the vaccine companies using cancer-based cell lines because they grow faster, so it saves money. And, of course, you can argue about whether there may be other reasons for doing this because it really does profit them. But if you inject cancerous DNA or DNA that has this code in it, then you'll start to express these growths in your own body. So, yeah, I mean, when you when you do this, you're actually creating the problems that you sometimes claim you're trying to solve.
Exactly. And with the GMO, there are no apparent federal regulations for it. I do know that in the supermarkets, the food is not labeled as such. And this can go anywhere from fresh produce into canned goods at some point if they're not already. I know that corn, pretty much across the board, is a GMO. And so if this is in canned foods and it's not labeled, or in your fresh produce section and it's not labeled as such, then you're ripping people off. I mean, they don't have a choice. They can't choose between, let's say, an organic, or maybe they stick with an organic, and there's even issues with organics as well now. And we don't have to go down that rabbit hole, but a whole another generation of our organic farmers are fighting, Monsanto and fighting the claims against them that they stole, GMO seeds and propagated them and such. And it is obviously control of the food chain on the one hand and control of the money, being that the way we used to do farming was, you plant something, you grow it, and then you replant seeds that grow off of, propagate off of that particular crop. And now, apparently, farmers are going to have to purchase these seeds, every year, repeatedly purchase seeds over and over again, which is so strange to me. I mean, that's just a strange direction right there.
It's
doesn't
bad
make any sense.
idea. It's a bad idea to spread genes, to spread seed that doesn't reproduce itself the next year. I mean, not only economically is it disastrous, but you have the potential of wiping out, through cross-contamination, the sections of the food supply. It's a real bad idea. It's dangerous.
Oh, it's very dangerous, and I don't know that anyone of these companies, like, for instance, Monsanto, have the foresight, or if they even consider what could happen in a short period of time, in only maybe 25 or 30 years from now, with this kind of action going on. And then you're taking out species. I mean, I read a story about, the bees. And forget the bees in California. I believe it. I don't recall what area of California it was when it was first discovered that the bees were, dying off and having disorders, colony disorders, and evacuating their hives and such. But what was even more interesting about the story I was reading is that, because the climate in Australia is the opposite, if you will, of our climate in the United States, because all these bees were dying off and they weren't able to propagate the crops, pollinate the crops, they went to Australia and brought over bees to California and basically made the bees work all year round. Because they'd work in Australia, then they'd bring them over here just when our climate was changing, when we need them in the spring, and made them work again. Slave bees, if you will. And I thought, this is insanity.
Yeah. It absolutely is, and it is insane. I think, in studying that, one of my favorite areas of study for the last 20 years. I mean, I got into this in my mid-20s. I started really getting into the way government really works, which is why I got involved in that political party. Is that in my worldview, Monsanto knows exactly what it's doing. The people who are tied up with Monsanto are the same people who are the eugenicists who control the pharmaceutical industry. They all are buds. To simplify it, it's like a good old boy system. Yeah, it's a huge good old boy system. They all help each other, and it's just crystal clear when you look at what's going on. Anyone who doesn't know about this, I mean, I feel like in your show we're probably preaching to the choir, because you probably have a very educated audience who knows about these things. But, they have a food vault, multiple food vaults, and Bill Gates is involved in this, and Rockefeller family is involved with this.
Sure.
And you've heard, most people have heard about that who are paying attention these days. And I think it's because they know exactly what they're doing. This is all part of a plan. This is all part of something that that these very powerful people who feel very entitled to do what they want with humanity, they are executing a plan. Because they want the world to be a little different than it is today. They want more power. They want smaller population. They want a more controllable population. And the introduction of mercury in everywhere. I mean, mercury was used in allopathic medicine for treatments not that long ago. Not too many decades ago. Fluoride. People know about fluoride and what it does to people. And I mean, science is there. Science knows what mercury does to people. And mercury is a wonderful, and I mean this sarcastically, a wonderful poison, because it takes a long time usually for people to get really sick from it, so people don't make the connection, for one thing. It also causes so many different diseases in different people that it's hard to track down. So it's very profitable for the companies. So anyway, when you look at the big picture and how these poisons have been introduced into our food and into medicine, and you see that the research that shows how harmful they are and exactly what they do have been known. Mercury was well known as a poison in 1800s. It was known for decades. I mean, that it comes off of amalgam fillings. In fact, there were what Dr. Hal Huggins calls amalgam world wars, where the old dental associations banned amalgam fillings before. And then the ADA rose up, and there was a big controversy between the two. And as you look at the history, whether it's GMOs or whether you're talking about mercury or fluoride or any of the other things that continually get introduced into our bodies without our knowledge or consent or because we have no other choice, you find out that the companies who are doing this know what's going on. So when I look at Monsanto, I don't look at someone who maybe doesn't know what they're doing or made some mistakes. I really believe they know exactly what they're doing. They know exactly what the outcome is going to be, and hence the food vaults. This is all part of part of the way that they want to change the world, and so they are.
Right, exactly. And it sounds like it's with my own research, Russ, it's a multitude of agendas. Like you said, they've got where they mess it up and then pay to clean it up, get people sick so the pharmaceuticals can give them the medications and keep them on those the rest of their life. But there was a report out that said that people over the age of 60 are on more than 8 pharmaceutical medications just to stay alive. That's how many prescribed medications that they're on. Most people over 60. That's incredible. And I do know a lot of people that are on quite a few medications, and it is quite interesting. And those medications indeed are poison as well, and so it just stimulates the problem. And of course the argument from a debunker or somebody who's on the other side or for the pharmaceuticals will always say, well, if that's the case and we're killing people off, why are people living longer? What do you answer to that? Why are people living longer if we have a genocide going on?
Well, people are living. First of all, people aren't living longer because they are living longer than from a while ago, from decades ago. But the average age span was just reduced a few years ago. I don't know. I think it was 4 or 6 years in the United States. So we're having a reversal of that now. Of course, I'm not surprised. I think it's probably being buffered. But why did people live longer in the late part of the 20th century? Through the 1950s and onward. Hygiene. We have plumbing, we have running water, we have soap, we have simple habits that the public developed, like washing your hands and being clean. If you look at, there's a big controversy about vaccines, and this just drives me crazy, is we've got charts. A wonderful doctor assembled a paper, there's a PDF online, with dozens of charts that show basically all of these diseases were sharply reducing in their popularity, in how many people had them. And then the pharmaceutical industry would introduce a vaccine after they had already plummeted, after the disease was already 3/4 of the way gone, because, in my opinion, of hygiene, simple hygiene. And then they took credit, like, look, we wiped out this, through vaccines. And if you look at the charts, and some people out there don't know what I'm talking about, that these diseases were already on their way out because of hygiene.
Right. And in today's world right now, I think it was the H1N1 virus that never really happened. It wasn't supposed to be like a kill half the world type of virus. Yeah. They tried to scare everybody. Yeah. And everyone needed to go get the shot, and everybody needed to rush in. And then it was like it kind of went poof and went away, and it was just mainstream top of priority news. Get your vaccines. So yeah, that's interesting. I think the public is starting to figure it out as well. But regardless of that, we have, in my opinion, you were talking about turn of the century, hygiene issues. And now that we have all the plumbing in and we have all of the, a lot available in regards to hygiene and very, very different habits, if you will, throughout the world, what do we do next? Because now it's infiltrating. Environmental toxicity is coming into our home now. It's coming in through the water that we take our shower and our bath with. It's coming into the water that we drink. It's coming in through a bag of groceries. It's coming in through the air that we breathe when we're standing outside in the backyard watering plants. So now we've taken this huge turn to realize that we are sitting in a toxic earth, on a toxic earth, if you will. So now, what do we do? What are some things that we can do? And I love your story because you talk about what happened and how it happened and how you detoxified, how you reclaimed yourself, your health, and how you sustain life today. And that's what you teach people. So I know that there are a lot of people interested in that aspect. There are a lot of people out there now who are studying this very aspect and putting the word out and working with others, and doctors who are working with other healers, if you will. And when they come across something that works, then they share it with others. There is controversy what might work for one person might not work for another. So what is the overall, I'm sure you'll agree with that as well. What works for one may not work for another. So what do people do? They have massive symptoms. A lot of them sound like what your symptoms were. Some are even worse symptoms. Some people are breaking out in rashes. Some people are getting Morgellons disease, which goes into a whole other realm now of infection. And you talk about paralyzation when you have a breakout. So where do you stand? Where do you go? How do you guide the quote unquote masses who are interested and are having issues? Where do we begin?
Okay, well, this is a big subject, so let me start with the fundamentals. Whenever you're dealing with someone who's toxic or has all these symptoms and they suspect toxicity, here's where you start. And before I say anything, I just have to say that I'm not a doctor. I do not prescribe. I do not claim to cure symptoms, conditions, or diseases. I'm just sharing my personal research and experience, nothing more. What you do, what everyone does. I'm not telling anybody to do anything. I'm just sharing what I have learned and what I've implemented in my own life. So what do we do? Well, the first thing when you've got somebody who's exposed to mercury or you've got somebody exposed to chemtrails or some kind of toxicity, the first thing you want to do, and this is what I did, and everything went away. 17 physical symptoms, emotional symptoms, memory came back, and I became feeling like Superman, waking up in the morning feeling incredible, like I never have, is you get rid of the source of toxicity. If you can do that, that is the first thing to do. Now, when it comes to chemtrails, which is my big activist subject I'm dealing with right now because I'm suffering so much from it and I'm fighting with it and I'm sustaining myself, but it's hard. It's a battle, but you can get through it. The thing with chemtrails is that makes it so hard is that everybody breathes the air. And, with fluoride, you have somewhat of a choice. With vaccines today, there's still exemptions, and so on. So the first thing I hope everyone does is, yes, we can individually take things and detox, and that's wonderful, and I'll get into that in just a few seconds, and that's important. But the first thing is write letters, make phone calls, expose it to media, and do everything that you can to get everybody understanding what's going on. Expose the subject and change the laws so it won't happen anymore. I believe that if we took fluoride out of water, we took the contaminants out of vaccines, if we stopped chemtrailing, you'd have a massive recovery of people from all of these diseases, and they'd wonder, it would be incredible. It would be like miraculous. And so that's the first thing. So please make sure you're involved in fighting and exposing and putting an end to this by getting the laws changed so they can no longer do this legally. Now, when it comes to detoxing, in the meantime, while we're fighting this and we're trying to get them to stop and we're still exposed to all of these things, there's a lot of things you can do. I can go through the gamut. One of the fundamental things that you can do for any type of metal toxicity is increase your glutathione levels. Glutathione is the body's natural method for getting rid of metals, and this applies to mercury and other metals as well. And the way you can increase glutathione is by taking N-acetylcysteine, which is often abbreviated NAC. NAC is a precursor to glutathione. It can help the body produce more glutathione, and if you get your glutathione levels up, then great. You're helping your body to detox. Understand that people produce vastly different amounts of glutathione. People who are high testosterone, if you're high testosterone, you have more muscle, you might have more hair, you might be a little bigger, you might, if you get middle-aged, be balding, because testosterone can produce dihydrotestosterone, which will kill your hair follicles, and what happens is testosterone can block your body's production through the chemical pathway of glutathione. So what you end up with is people who are high testosterone are low glutathione. They're bad metal detoxifiers. So this is why do you have a ratio of 4 out of 5 children are male, high testosterone males who get autism, who get ADD, who get ADHD. Well, Dr. Haley exposed this in his incredible work about why these kids are having all of these problems, and I feel like I was one of them, even though I wasn't diagnosed at the time. I had the spinning thoughts, and I couldn't focus, and all of this stuff, and that went away when my fillings came out. Went away completely, but it came back in 2005 when the spraying started. So, N-acetylcysteine is a primary thing. Alpha-lipoic acid. This is also something that can help remove metals, especially from the CNS, the central nervous system, the brain. It's often abbreviated ALA. You want to be careful with alpha-lipoic acid. If you're mercury toxic or you're metal toxic and you take more than 25 milligrams, I've even heard of people taking as little as 15 or 10 milligrams and getting terrible headaches. This happened to me. I tried taking, I think, a 200 milligram dose right after my amalgam removal. I was really mercury toxic right after my amalgams were removed in 2000, and I got a headache that lasted almost a week. It was horrible. Now, you have to, when you're detoxifying, you have to do it at a rate that your body can handle. So if you're going to start taking these things, start with small amounts and slowly graduate upward so that you get the stuff out. There's some concepts that people need to understand about detoxifying. And let me use a specific example. A lot of people say, use cilantro, use cilantro. Well, cilantro is fantastic, but I would never use it early in a detox program. You should use it later on. Cilantro is a very unique and incredibly useful substance for detox because it's what I call an expellant. It actually causes the central nervous system to expel mercury and other metals potentially into the lymphatic system and into the bloodstream, which is great because once you freed those metals up, then if you have a chelator present in your blood, then the chelator, to chelate simply means to bind to. You need something to bind to those metals to grab them up out of the blood and to carry them out of the body. So I personally would only use cilantro after you've been detoxing using a chelator for at least several months, and then start adding in little bits of cilantro and then graduate upwards slowly. But cilantro is very useful. Yeah.
What would an example of a chelator be?
Well, the most popular chelator for metals is sulfur. For instance, I just mentioned N-acetylcysteine. Well, if you listen to part of that name, it's cysteine. And what is cysteine? Cysteine is a sulfur-bearing amino acid. And I use cysteine during my mercury detox that I did back in 2000, right after my fillings were removed, because cysteine contains sulfur. And this is why people might use chlorella. That's another popular detoxifier, which you need to be careful with at first. There's a small percentage of the population that have a very bad reaction to chlorella, so if you're going to try it, take a very, very little bit first. But the whole idea behind chlorella is a very sulfur-rich organism, and that's why they crack the shells open, because they want to expose the sulfur. If you look, the chlorella companies say, we have cracked shell chlorella. Well, why? Because you're exposing the sulfur. Just take a smell of chlorella. You'll smell the sulfur. It smells bad, but that's what I used. So sulfur is a chelator, a very popular chelator, very, very popular chelator for autistic, ADD, ADHD kids that's been popularized by Dr. Cutler using the Cutler protocol is DMSA. What this basically is now this is not a natural, this is a chemical, but it's called a dithiol. It has a couple sulfur atoms in it that bind to mercury and bind to metals and grabs them up and securely holds them and carries them out of the body. And one thing to be aware of with the chelators, these are examples of chelators, but different chelators will detox through different organs. For instance, DMSA will detox through the kidneys, and there are some advantages to that. And I'll tell you what they are. When you detox with free sulfur, like if you're taking chlorella or you're taking cysteine or some other sulfur source, and you're using sulfur to detox, sulfur will go in the blood, bind to in some organ, and bind to mercury, bind to other things, and pull it out. But the sulfur will be filtered by the liver, and it will be excreted through the bile ducts into the intestines. And what happens, the disadvantage to that, and this isn't a horrible thing, but it's just a thing that you have to be aware of, is that when you have metals in your intestines love to absorb those metals back in. So you get what's called redistribution. Some of those metals that are thrown from the liver through the bile ducts into the intestines are reabsorbed. So you've got to have something in the intestines to make sure that that reabsorption doesn't take place, which is what you would use algin for. So sulfur is a chelator that detoxes through the liver. DMSA is a chelator that detoxes through the kidneys. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does, absolutely. And I was going to ask the difference of the two, and you explained it very well. And thank you for that, because I know like 20 years ago when people were trying to detox, their livers were getting loaded up, and then you have another condition that starts. And obviously it's come a long way in especially, what you just explained. I can't repeat it all, but with the DMSA and the kidney and then the sulfur and detoxing liver, et cetera. I don't want to repeat all of that because you said it way better than I could. And then what about, I do hear the public speaking about colloidal silver. What is that used for?
Colloidal silver is awesome. There are volumes of research out there on colloidal silver, and before I even get into that, I will say there's this fear about ageria, where you're going to turn blue. I've read it is absolutely ridiculous that, first of all, the types of silver that accumulate under the skin are large particle silvers. If you have a machine that makes your own silver and it doesn't do a good job and makes large particles, that's when you get the distribution. Small particle silver, which is true colloidal silver, will not deposit under. This is more propaganda that people have heard, and I've read the government paper that scares everybody to death about it, and it's so deceptive because they're using silver nitrate and silver citrate. These are different compounds that act differently, and they try to, by association, say, oh, this is colloidal silver. It's not. It's silver citrate. It's silver nitrate. It's different stuff. Okay, and so just do your research about, if you're afraid of turning blue, do your research and understand that there's a whole other side of the story. And if you're getting your health information from mainstream news, you know nothing about it. Look at the true medical research. Colloidal silver is incredibly awesome. The reason it's even around today is because it was grandfathered in before DSHEA, before the protections were passed in Congress, so we still have it today, which is wonderful. Colloidal silver kills bacteria, destroys the ability for viruses to bind and to function, because viruses aren't really living. Viruses are just little pieces of genetic material, to simplify it. It destroys mold and fungus. So I love colloidal silver. I use it daily and have for years. And I have some research on a website. If you ever, at the end of the show or whenever, want me, I'd be happy to give that to people where they can read.
Yes, we're going to definitely. Yes, we're going to want all of that information. I used to make colloidal silver as well, and it's something that is very easy to make. You're absolutely right. The type of silver and how you set it up. I used to use it, set it up with a mayonnaise jar, make a jar full like that. And you're absolutely correct. And if you, I'll say this: where I used to get my silver was somebody who was a very good friend of mine who was in the jewelry industry, who made jewelry. So he gave me, pure silver. And that's what it is, pure silver. But anyway, I'm not going to get too much further into that. We are, this just went by too fast. We're going to have you back another time, Russ.
I'd love it.
Incredible.
Sure,
oh, my gosh, I feel like I've been on the phone with you for 10 minutes. It's like, I'm taking notes all over the place. This is great. Now, I know that a lot of people have been asking about colloidal silver, so why don't we do this? Why don't we give, we've got 8 minutes left, so you can take your time. Why don't we give contact information for you? Maybe on your website you can direct people to this colloidal silver background or detoxing kidney and liver and some of that information. Maybe we can point them in that direction. So why don't we give out your website first?
Okay. There's a couple different places you can go. If you're looking for detox information, we have the whole Cutler protocol outlined. We have a great mercury form, which really touches on other metals as well. So if you're looking for mercury information and detox information, one place I would recommend going is to orbisvitae.com. I'll spell that for you. It's O-R-B-I-S. Orbis, it's a Latin word for circle. Orbis Vitae. Vitae is like life, so it means circle of life. Orbis Vitae, VITAE.com, and scroll down a little bit, or go to the forum, first of all, click the link for the forum, and scroll down a little bit and you'll see the mercury forum. And if you look in there, there's a whole list of articles, the Cutler protocols outlined there, all kinds of information about metals and detoxing and stuff you can find there. If you want to learn about detoxing aluminum, for instance, we didn't even get into malic acid. That's how you get aluminum out of the body. It's the strongest non-prescription way. It's even better than many of the prescription ways, which are pretty obscure. You can't really find them these days. If you want to learn about that and you want to learn about chemtrails, Global Skywatch.com. We have a whole bunch of forums there. We also have a forum for any city. If you want to start organizing your city and you need a forum, we'll give you a forum. You can have your own forum, your own picture gallery, and if you need any other resources for web resources to help support your group, just call me, contact me, and I will do whatever I can. I'm, fairly skilled in the web arena and the programming arena, and I want to see groups flourish. So Global Skywatch, and if you want to email me, you can email me at admin, it stands for administrator, ADMIN, at globalskywatch.com. If you want to learn about some of these amazing supplements, please visit. We have a lot of research, all scientific research on herbs and vitamins that my business has put together at onlythebestherbs.com. That's onlythebestherbs.com. And if you want to learn about colloidal silver, look for Silver Shield on the home page. You'll see it there. Click on it, and you'll have a page with scientific information about it. Algin, which we didn't get to talk about, which prevents redistribution of metals in the colon. So if you're detoxing using free sulfur, you got to have your Algin. Very, very important. You can learn about Algin there and all of the other supplements if you really want to learn about the science behind it. And if you want to talk to me on the phone, drop me an email at admin@globalskywatch.com. I'll be happy to give you my phone number. And I talk to people every week about detoxing and other health problems, and just give them free information just to help people.
Excellent. That is fabulous. And what I'm going to do as well for the listeners is I'm going to create a video and audio of this show. We'll upload it to the YouTube channel, and I will have all of this information that you've discussed and your contact information on that video and in the description of the video. So anyone that might have missed this or didn't have a pen handy, please, by all means, just go to that video on the YouTube channel for the Truth Denied talk show, and you will find it under Russ Tanner. And is that all right with you, Russ?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. And then I appreciate everything that you've discussed, and you're right. We just didn't even we just barely touched the surface. Regardless, your name's out there now. I'm sure people will be contacting you. More listeners will be contacting you because they are interested in what you're talking about. They're interested in what to do for themselves. Many people in the aluminum in the blood. They're finding aluminum in their blood. And so globalskywatch.com, people, that's going to help you out tremendously. So that was Russ Tanner. Russ, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. We've got a couple minutes left.
Thank you, Roxy. Thank you. Is there anything we want to talk about in the last 2 minutes that you want to cover?
No, actually, nope. We're gonna move on to a couple of announcements. Okay. So again, Russ, thank you so much for coming to the show. And
all right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Again, that will be a video on YouTube this afternoon with all of this contact information. Amazing man. We will have Russ back again. We do have a surprise guest for you next Friday. I am not going to tell you who it is yet. It's actually more than one person, and it is astounding what we are putting together. And, of course, I want to thank all of those who make this show possible, the GIC Network, Dr. Bernard Alvarez. And speaking of Dr. Bernard Alvarez, the Just Bernard Show is on summer break next week. The fall season begins September 5th with Project Camelot's Carrie Cassidy on the Just Bernard Show at 1 o'clock. Don't forget that. Write that down. September 5th with Carrie Cassidy. Ooh, I'm going to listen to that. Anyway, you've been listening to the Truth Denied Talk Radio. We had some interference at the beginning of the show. I will cut that part off, and we will just begin with our conversation with Russ Tanner for the show, for those of you who listen to the archives later again. We'll have all the information on Russ's contact information, Global Skywatch, and information for detoxing mercury, detoxing aluminum, your kidneys, your liver, all of it. He is the man. We will definitely have all of that located on the video. You take care. This is the Truth Denied Talk Radio. I'm your host, Roxy Lopez. Have a great weekend. Actually a big roadblock at that point, and I can totally relate to that. I'm a pretty, like you, worker bee, and so if I started to get lethargic like that, not be able to function, I mean, that's pretty noticeable. Did you go to Western doctors for that? Did you get checked out? Did you try to get some other opinion other than how you were feeling?
No, I didn't. I didn't look any medical help. That's the time, back in 1995, when I started having these issues, I started getting involved in, started doing my own research on herbs and supplements and how I could use natural supplements and herbs and foods and minerals and vitamins to help me. And just did I'm a researcher also by nature. I love to find the puzzle, solve the puzzle. What is the problem? How do we fix this problem? So I did not go to any Western any doctors or anything. I was doing this on my own.
That's great. And what caused you to go in that direction instead? Was it the friend in your life that had the situation with fibromyalgia sort of led you to this, or was that during the process when you were looking into your own fatigue, et cetera? And I know it's very frightening when you just said you thought you were going to die. That's how a lot of my the emails that I'm getting, people are getting really afraid because fatigue and then of course depression that sets in along with it is very debilitating, and it is a fearful thing. So what caused you to? What a gift that you turned towards this herbal remedy versus, going into a Western doctor.
I had been interested in it a few years earlier, and I don't even know. A few years before my health started to rapidly deteriorate between 1995 and 2000, I just started hearing things about it, and I was just drawn to it. I just felt like this is cool. And I did some research and found that there was research and science behind it because I'm a science lover. I love science. And I started finding out that not only was there a lot of science behind it, but I was intrigued by the fact that the government was covering it up, that the FDA was suppressing information about these things, which usually at that point I was educated about what goes on behind the scenes at the government with a lot like the FDA. To discover that if the FDA doesn't like it, it's probably good. It's important and something we should pay attention to. So,
right.
So I had a little background already.
Exactly. The herbs and those types of medicinals seem to have qualities to them that actually work, and the diagnosis associated, let's say if you go into a naturopath, is more holistic. In other words, going after the problem instead of the symptom. And that is something that has been going on for 25 years plus. It seems that, and you're correct, the FDA, it's like they don't want us to get to a point of where we heal because once we heal from the inside out, we live longer, et cetera, et cetera. So there's always been. I'm sorry about that. Skype just dropped the call, so I don't know what happened there, but we're still on the air. So, Russ, why don't we just get into, we'll start the show from here. Why don't we start discussing your background, what happened to you as far as toxicities go, and what you do now to aid others with this movement. I know that you are the head of Global Skywatch, and you have quite a bit to share with the audience. So why don't I just let you roll? I'd like to start with experience, what happened to you that guided you roughly a decade ago into the area that you now work in.
Absolutely. First, I want to say thank you for having me on your show. I'm honored to be here. My problem started with mercury toxicity. Back in my early teen years, I started having depression, started having fatigue, depression. I had a lot of shyness, became kind of terribly withdrawn socially, and I didn't know what it was at the time. At the time as a kid, you don't know what's going on. You just feel like everybody's like that until you learn better. But eventually I learned it was amalgam illness or toxicity from the mercury vapor coming off of amalgam fillings. So about the time you start getting fillings, that's when all this started happening to me. So basically in 1995 I became very, very ill. Things started happening between 95 and 2000. I started gaining weight, which was not something that I did. I mean, I played racquetball, I rode my bike, I went out boating. I was very athletic, and suddenly started getting fatigued, started having severe heart problems. So in that 5-year period, everything collapsed. Started having candida issues, horrible sleep problems, on top of my already the emotional issues that I had about shyness and fears and phobias and stuff that I had from childhood. Well, in 2000, I was talking to a friend. Long story short, it's a long story, but a long story short, I was talking to a friend, and she had fibromyalgia, was bedridden, and I was telling her about what was going on with me, and she said, "You have mercury toxicity from your fillings." I'm like, "What? I've never heard of this. What's going on?" Well, she had fibromyalgia, was diagnosed, 5 years, went to one doctor to another, one pharmaceutical after another, and finally she got on the internet, did some research, started having her fillings out. She couldn't afford to have them all out, but she had a few taken out, got out of bed, went back to work, and started changing her life. After 5 years of medical help.
And this is just removing fillings.
Yeah, and she didn't remove all of them. She just removed a few of them, and she started feeling better. So that was a revelation. You ever have something happen to you where you feel like you just got hit by a 2x4? Like, that's the answer I was waiting for. I've been looking for 5 years after all my life had gone. I thought I had cancer. I thought I was going to die, working 4 hours a day. I didn't nap every afternoon. This is not like me. I'm a guy who works 14 hours a day.
Now, I have a question. Did you now? That would be a big symptom, a component of that has been glaring, if you will. And good for you that you sort of got into that and discovered that, and now, of course, you can speak on the subject till the cows come home, and I appreciate that. What is with your Global Skywatch? You've got a Global Skywatch. What's that all about, and what caused you to start that particular situation?
Well, that's a great segue into the the last half of the story. Is basically after I had my amalgams out, everything I ever had went away. My memory, my short-term memory, I couldn't remember names, dates, and places. That memory within about 6-8 months after my amalgams were removed, my memory came back, and it was like a computer. I could remember the names of Hollywood actors, the dates that movies played, whatever. If it was trivia or if it was important, it was incredible. But anyway, everything went away after amalgam removal, and I had 5 years of absolute bliss. And this is what got me into Global Skywatch, the next thing that happened to me. 5 years of no sleep issues, 5 years of feeling powerful, no fears, no fear of confrontation, no shyness. The 17 physical symptoms I had all just vanished and went away. It was absolutely incredible. And I finally realized, I said, this is the way people are supposed to feel. This is the way life is supposed to be. Well, in 2003, I moved to Jamestown, New York, had a view of the whole city out my office window, and 2 years after moving there, in 2005, I suddenly saw chemtrails. I didn't know what they were, but I had always been interested in jets and planes. I had taken flying lessons when I was younger. My whole family flew. I had skydivers in my family, Army Ranger. So I had